Good morning, and thank you for joining City staff this morning in this virtual meeting environment. My name is Min Tai, and I am the Executive Director for Building and Planning. Before we start the meeting today, I'd like to take a moment to thank some of our speakers from last night, providing staff with valuable feedback on the virtual meeting platform. While we were not able to make adjustments for today's meeting, I do agree with the recommendation and the feedback, and I just want to share with you that moving forward, we will be looking for a different platform to respond to those comments. So with that, almost 5 years ago, the city set a goal to comprehensively update the general plan. While certain components of the plan were updated periodically, the last time the general plan was completely updated was in 1982. Our goal today is to take you from the beginning and bring you up to date. We will go over the objectives of the general plan update, the next steps, and then along the way of the presentation, we will pause for questions and answer. Please advance to the next slide, Scott. Scott? Thank you. Just some housekeeping. This meeting is being concurrently translated to Spanish. To access the interpretation line, you can call 669-900-9128, followed by the pound or hashtag sign. And then when you're asked for the meeting ID, please input 542-334-173, again, followed by the pound sign. Please advance to the next slide, Scott. So to participate in this morning during this meeting, you will be able to participate remotely in two ways during our Q&A session. To speak, you can click on the raise your hand icon in your dialog box, and you will be put in the queue. And then if you want, you can also submit your questions in writing by typing the questions in the control panel, and staff will be reading out those questions. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Bernie Carvajal. Bernie is the principal planner for the city and is the project manager for this project. Before I turn over to Bernie, I just want to share with the room that we have 53 registrants for this meeting. So in the room, we have 53 members of the audience. Thank you. Bernie?
All right, thank you for the introduction, Min. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Bernie.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Bernie Carvajal, as Min mentioned. I'm here this morning to provide you with a brief overview on where we are today in regards to this general plan, since this process began in 2015, as Min mentioned. Thank you to our participants who are registered. It sounds like we have another great turnout this morning and are joining us today. As outlined in the flyer that many of you may have received either electronically or in the mail, our goal for the meeting today is to discuss, as again Min mentioned, where we are today in terms of the update, to discuss the prime objectives of the plan, provide an overview of new topics and major changes, and then we'll also discuss next steps. There's going to be a short break during the presentation about halfway through where I'll allow for discussion and a Q&A at the end of the meeting, at the end of the presentation, I'm sorry, following the presentation. With that, Scott, can we advance to the next slide, please? All right, as many of you are aware, the general plan is one of the most important documents towards achieving our community's future here in Santa Ana. In this case, our general plan provides a long-range tool that sets goals, policies, and programs to guide the implementation of our future vision. As required by the state of California, there are actually 7 required elements. But as of 2018, the topic of environmental justice is now required by the state of California for all general plans moving forward. Next slide, please. As stated earlier, this term of general plan is definitely something general. It's very general. It includes goals and policies. Once adopted by the City Council, these goals and policies would help then to influence our future plans that could implement those goals and policies. For example, an update to our zoning code, a capital projects improvement plan, a parks master plan, or a different type of master plan, such as one for senior citizens, for example, could be an implementation of this general plan. Next slide, please. This slide covers some of the outreach efforts that we've done thus far. In addition to evaluating data and known issues, we reached out to dozens of residents and key stakeholders throughout the city of Santa Ana, as Min mentioned, over the past 5 years when this project was initiated. This includes formation of a general plan advisory group, coordination through meetings through Comlink, consultation with neighborhood associations in environmental justice areas, and then discussions with the youth, outreach to our business community, and communication with community-based organizations and other coalitions.
Bernie, may I interrupt you for a moment, please?
Yes.
It's been requested that we go back to the entry slide just very briefly to go over how the Spanish speakers can access the presentation. And if that could be spoken in Spanish by Margarita or some of staff, that would be helpful as well. Margarita, will you be sharing it over the presentation?
I can do it. Si necesitan interpretación en español, por favor llamen a la área 669-900-9128 y le van a preguntar que ingresen el ID de la Junta, que va a ser 542-334-173 y el signo. Y si necesitan, si tienen preguntas en esa línea, por favor opriman estrella 9 y lo vamos a repetir en la línea de español, pero por favor llame área 669-900-9128 y ingrese el ID de la reunión, que va a ser 542-334-173. Y si tiene preguntas durante la junta, nomás va a tener que oprimir estrella 9. Y vamos a repetir eso también en la línea de español. Gracias.
Thank you, Alyssa. We can advance to slide number 8, please. All right, so in the previous slide where we left off, we spoke about some of our initial outreach efforts commencing in 2015. These outreach efforts resulted in key takeaways for the formation of our new plan. Our community was clear and that the new plan should protect and enhance our cultural, historic, and community assets, create land use patterns that promote healthy and active lifestyles, ensure equitable distribution of resources for our city, create a sustainable and livable city, and lastly, promote lifelong education and continue to focus on our economic prosperity. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, by protecting some of these key assets and addressing our priorities and building upon them, this new general plan aims to be a working document that's streamlined, easy to use, and will be comprised of 12 new elements to replace the previous 16 that were contained in our last update, which was completed in 1982. The plan is based on 5 new core values, which were developed back in 2015 and 2016 through our initial outreach effort and throughout our general plan advisory group, which will hold each goal and policy accountable to these key community pillars developed amongst ourselves and the community, and the input by the general plan advisory group, which are culture, sustainability, health, education, and equity. Next slide, please. This slide covers a brief timeline of where we're at today, a little bit more in an illustrative fashion to show some of the key milestones that we've reached throughout the process. The plan has become what it is today following this multi-year effort, and didn't start just this year. It started with initially a community outreach program that involved key stakeholders, residents, the business community, and has continued to reach out to our senior and youth. Our youth represents our future. We will continue and have given ongoing feedback to our city council along each step of the process. The timeline here shows 2015 when we got started, the general plan advisory group in 2016, followed by 2017 with our general plan advisory group recognition, and 2018 with our recognition, and followed by a land use survey that was done in 2019, which brings us to the present year, where we began our environmental review process, conducted some additional community outreach related to environmental justice, and tonight, or this morning, we're here to talk about where we're at with the plan and the next steps moving forward. Next slide, please. We wanted to share with you today what we had posted or will have available here for public review. This is the first glimpse of where we're at in 2018. The first item on the slide here provides that first glimpse or outline of the framework that presented and affirmed by our city council back in December of 2018, where staff presented the plan on behalf of the community, which included the vision statement, core values, draft maps, and goals and policies that were created by the hard work of the general plan advisory group and our very own community. This was followed by a citywide land use workshop and survey series that resulted in a land use plan before you today, which we will cover in subsequent slides here. And in February of this year, as I mentioned, the environmental notice of preparation was released for public review. Early commitment to environmental justice through our core values such as equity and health were formulated back in 2016 and later confirmed by the state through SB 1000. The plan continues to include environmental justice policies throughout the document, as outlined in the June policy summary, which is also now available. Next slide, please. A little bit more on SB 1000 that we mentioned it. SB 1000 requires cities like ours to update public policies for disadvantaged communities in order to reduce unique or compounded health risks, promote civil engagement in the process, and lastly, prioritize improvements and programs in these key areas. The slide indicates a map on the right, and there's some areas that are highlighted there in purple, which represent residents that are at high risk of exposure to pollution in the air, water, or soil, which then is further compounded by socioeconomic and other health issues. Recently, we had some impacts with COVID and we have a current health crisis. The general plan team was faced with new challenges on engagement with the community. We had to kind of retool and regroup, and in order to reach our environmental justice areas, staff produced an informative flyer on environmental justice, which covered some of the key things that are happening in the city, presented some early policies, and covered kind of an overview of what the topic of environmental justice means. That was followed up with an online e-learning tool to describe key considerations, and ongoing work in the area of environmental justice. Also, as I mentioned, an overview policy document on the topic was released for public review and comment. Comments and responses received by members of the community throughout this process will be shared at upcoming study sessions with the Planning Commission, City Council. We have received various written comments on this topic, and we intend to share those with the appropriate City Council members and for future public hearings. As I mentioned, the city's committed to incorporation of these policies throughout our general plan. We were at a very unique time here at the city where the city had two options, the first being to create a standalone environmental justice element. The second option provided to us was to create environmental justice policies and goals throughout all elements of our general plan. Since at this time, we are conducting a comprehensive general plan update, it made sense to create goals and policies that would be represented throughout our document. Currently, we show about 135 environmental justice supported policies, of which 74 of those speak to our original core values back in 2016 of equity and health, which highlights that some of our early work was consistent with the community's feedback. In summary, over 54,000 flyers were mailed between the environmental justice areas and now for this work study sessions that we have to focus on the topic of environmental justice, as well as providing an update on our general plan. If I can have the next slide, please. This slide begins a series of slides as were covered in our initial outline and that Min described for our objectives today. These slides start to talk about some of the key topics and what we heard. The first in being the topic of environmental justice. Some of the things we heard that folks are really concerned about particulate matter and exposure to places like waste recycling sites and other forms of air pollutants. Access to healthy foods, especially in our underserved areas, the need to increase our public engagement, providing for safe and sanitary housing, and removing conflicting and incompatible land uses. We had quite a few speakers that came out last night to talk about this specific issue, to resound the concern by our community. With that, where we're at today is we've included a new community element that didn't exist in our previous general plan, as well as emphasize that health continues to be a core value. Today, we're also going to go through a few sample policies and implementation actions. If I can get the next slide, please. This is kind of a sample of some of the goals and policies that our upcoming general plan will have that speaks specifically to these key topics. The first example is one from our land use element, which would be related to hazardous and polluting uses with the goal of improving the health of our residents, students, and workers by limiting the operation of industrial uses, those uses that are hazardous, dangerous, and polluting our environment, that are specifically in close proximity to sensitive receptors, with priorities given to areas of environmental justice boundaries. Next slide, please. A potential implementation action, and that's different from the policy that I just covered because actions have specific targeted dates and are required to have typically an agency or a department that's going to be responsible for implementing one of those overarching policies. A potential action could be to collaborate with our residents and industry stakeholders to create an incentive and amortization program. All that essentially means is that of phasing out to relocate existing heavy industrial uses adjacent to sensitive uses. So in this case, the collaboration would be between residents and the industry stakeholders, for example, AQMD and the residents. The city would also have a large part in becoming a mediator to those conversations. Next slide, please. One of the additional topics that we heard is in the area of health and wellness. Again, the lack of access to healthy food options, open space and community centers, and the need for additional additional areas for open space, providing safe and active mobility choices for all ages and abilities, equitable access to public services and spaces. And in response to that, the general plan proposes to include these areas in the community element, as well as, again, in this topic, emphasizing health as a core value. Next slide, please. An example of a policy, in this case, equitable and recreational spaces, would promote the development and use of municipal buildings, such as City Hall, or any other sports fields or facilities that are owned by public agencies, indoor facilities, sports fields, and outdoor spaces for recreation that serves residents throughout the city, again with priority given to areas that are currently underserved and or within these boundaries. Within these topics, within these elements, there will be maps that identify specific areas that will coincide with that environmental justice map that I shared with you earlier, so that we can start to zero in where a community need is. Next slide, please. Again, in speaking about potential action or what we're going to do about this type of situation, we coordinate with community residents, property owners, and other stakeholders to identify vacant and potentially underutilized properties and strategize how these properties could be repurposed into public parks or commercial recreation facilities. So there's definitely some opportunity there. Next slide, please. This new topic has brought quite a bit of excitement, especially given our recent 150th anniversary of our city. A new historic preservation element is being proposed for the first time ever as part of our general plan. We heard from our community loud and clear that we want to preserve our architectural heritage. We'd like to ensure new development respects and is compatible with our existing community. We want to maintain our character and sense of place and identity, preserve our buildings through creative and adaptive reuse of them. And then these changes to city policy would then be implemented through our historic preservation element. And then with specific attention to culture being such a huge part of our city. Keep in mind that historic preservation isn't limited to structures and buildings, but also includes things like murals and key locations throughout the city that have historical significance, as well as one of the most important part, our people. Next slide, please. This is a nice photo. It shows an original gathering of folks in our downtown for a pancake breakfast that I think a few years back the city wanted to recreate, which was kind of a neat event. Policy 1.3 would create historic districts and design standards to explore opportunities to preserve these neighborhoods that are largely intact and add to the additional character through the creation of historic districts or urban design standards. Next slide, please. A potential action related to historic preservation could be to specifically establish public realm plans for all of our historic districts, including things like landscaping, street improvements, sidewalk improvements, and lighting, which would enhance and further complement our historic setting. Next slide, please. Another key topic as part of our initial outreach and throughout our process has been the topic of community empowerment. Our residents were successful in lobbying stakeholders to create the Sunshine Ordinance. And most recently through COVID in our recent times, there's a huge emphasis right now on social justice, and folks are coming out in numbers to increase community participation. And they want to be included as part of the policy making with the city and want to emphasize an improvement of communication from the city and outreaching to members of non-English speaking communities, which in our city we have a very diverse group of residents that speak a multitude of languages. So what can we do to increase that capacity? You know, in fact, we received some feedback from our meeting last night that made some requests immediately. We received some immediate feedback on how we can improve last night's presentation, and we're working on trying to implement those, as Min stated earlier, in future presentations. So we appreciate that. Some proposed changes to public policy would be to build upon collaboration between city neighborhoods and community organizations, and continue to strengthen our neighborhood identity through an urban design and preservation element. Next slide, please. An example of a policy that would empower our community would be to facilitate this community engagement and dialogue in policy decisions and outcomes affecting land use and development. This meeting here this morning is a good example of the city's attempt at trying to reach our community for feedback and for a continuous dialogue. Next slide, please. A potential action that would drill down a bit further on my previous comment would be to strengthen partnerships with local community organizations to enhance community engagement efforts and identify how to overcome obstacles for engagement. We have many key stakeholders throughout our city, and as part of our community outreach and general plan advisory group, we attempted at creating kind of a cross-section of our community by involving key stakeholders throughout our planning process so far. Next slide, please. Another topic of consideration that was brought forth by the community had to do with alternative transportation. People were concerned about safety for pedestrians and cyclists in our city. I'm sure we've all read in the paper about incidents that have occurred with collisions with both pedestrians and vehicles throughout our city. How can we ensure that our sidewalks and curbs at our intersections are both ADA accessible and safe? How do we plan for a walkable neighborhood and improve the safety and connections to our transit system overall? As I mentioned in a previous presentation, our circulation element has been in process for a number of years. The circulation element has now been merged to be adopted concurrently with our general plan, and is a required element, one of the 7 required elements, as I stated, and promotes a safe and efficient multimodal circulation system. Next slide, please. A policy to help implement these ideas would be to create complete streets, transform our travelways to accommodate all users through street design and amenities such as sidewalks, trees, landscaping, street furniture, and bus shelters. Next slide, please. When we're talking about potential actions, one of the things that we could do is conduct a study of the existing street network to identify streets that can be more complete. Based upon the findings of such studies, the city shall prepare and submit recommendations to the City Council on a priority list of complete streets improvements. Some of this work has been completed, and I encourage you to check out our draft circulation element as it is released later this week. Next slide, please. Another resounding comment that we received both last night and throughout our process has been equitable parks and recreation, another huge topic that our residents and community are speaking loud and clear about. There's a lack of community centers and libraries to match our current population. Not enough open space, not enough parks. We need more services and programs for our youth, and more safer and better maintained parks and open space. How can we incorporate some of these concerns? the city is working on the completion of a parks master plan, which would follow immediately as an implementation action after the implementation of our general plan, and would identify locations suitable for increased park capacity and locations suitable for new development, as well as our open space element, land use element, community element, and public service element all have policies that speak to this concern. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, in the open space element, it will reference a park master plan where we will create and maintain a Santa Ana Parks master plan that incorporates data on the need, demographics, and health outcomes as a result of park deficiencies throughout our city. Next slide, please. A potential action that would get us closer to implementing some of these needs would be to review and amend ordinances as necessary. For example, to require sufficient park dedication or fees from developers to meet this open space standard as part of subsequent development projects. And this will be outlined in the general in the general plan and the park master plan. Next slide, please. A few members of the public spoke up last night and explained that COVID had changed the dynamic of our retail industry and generally of Main Street throughout the city and throughout our nation. What we heard was that we want to continue to attract businesses that provide community benefits outside of just tax revenue. How can we distribute funding for commercial improvements citywide? How do we capitalize on Santa Ana's proximity to regional destinations and resorts, such as the resorts in Anaheim, our prime destinations here in the city, such as the Discovery Science Center, our Discovery Cube, Bowers Museum, our Heritage Museum on the southwest part of town, and other attractions like the Santa Ana Zoo. How can we capitalize on these prime destinations in our city? And how can we create additional investments and programs to assist low-income residents? The policies must have a stronger emphasis on the city's role in protecting the existing businesses, facilitating investment, and improving the city's overall health and public image. Next slide, please. An example found in our future economic prosperity element would be community-led economic development. To support community-based economic development initiatives, such as a Buy Local campaign where we try to favor our small businesses and our local businesses, marketing strategies that would protect these businesses as well as worker cooperatives. Next slide, please. Another potential policy would be to partner with the Chamber of Commerce, local business organizations, and our local colleges to explore the feasibility of establishing a business incubator. Next slide, please. All right, I'd like to have a small break here. I wanted to emphasize the opportunity for our folks that are listening in via our Spanish platform, as Min mentioned. Alyssa, if you could reiterate the instructions for those folks that are dialing in either on our English line or our Spanish line, please. Go ahead.
Si necesitan traducción en español, por favor llamen a la área 669-900-9128 y después van a tener que ingresar el ID de la reunión, que va a ser 542-334-173. Y si tienen cualquier pregunta en esta línea, pueden oprimir *9 y voy a repetir el número. Si necesita traducción, El número de teléfono es área 669-900-9128 y va a ingresar el ID de la reunión, que va a ser 542-334-173. Gracias.
Thank you, Alyssa. As you see on these two slides here, as Alyssa was mentioning in Spanish, there is a separate Zoom line available for those that like to comment in Spanish, as well as for those that like to participate during the meeting. If you'd like to raise your hand using this platform in order to ask a question, so we can keep track of those folks that have questions. We've reached the midpoint of this presentation, and I'd like to open up for some question and answers here. And I'd like to keep our comments related to the prior discussion. Just so you know, as per the agenda, we're going to go over some of the land use focus areas and some of those key changes in the subsequent part of the presentation. So I'll go ahead and open up to questions. Melanie, are you there?
Yes, I'm right here.
All right.
We have one person that has raised their hand for a question. Actually, there's two. The first one was Katherine Cox. Katherine?
Hi, good morning, Katherine.
Katherine has taken her hand down, so we can move on to the next speaker. And that would be Sandra Pochapena.
Hi, good morning, Sandra. Welcome back.
You need to unmute her. I did it.
Okay, good.
Yes, hello. Okay. So thank you so much for your presentation and for taking into account people's comments from yesterday.
Catherine saying she
Today, I just wanted to point out that it's great that you have stated, could you turn that down, please? That you would make some accommodations or some changes to remove and relocate some of the more polluting industries, but where would they be relocated to? Would they be relocated into another part of our already dense city? That's one thing. I didn't see mentioned anything about actually phasing out an entire area of industry, which is our aerospace manufacture and heavy industry and our gross polluters. Like, I have not seen that actually stated in the plan, and that concerns me. The other thing is when you've mentioned several times about what the community has asked for and has complained, about not having enough library space, not having community centers, wanting to retain, its historic structures and a sense of identity and history and sense of place for every neighborhood. But in practice, like right now in my neighborhood in Pacific Park East Side, we're having a really hard time just holding on to the Cypress Street Fire Station, which is over 100 years old. We would love to have it repurposed as a library or a community center. The past Parks and Rec director and past city manager Gerardo Moet had suggested that it be available as an addition to our library history room and potentially a digital lending library. That's wonderful. We have a whole group of people that for over a decade have been wanting to fundraise and work to retain that property, to make it available to our community. But in practice, we've just been hearing excuses about how that property is no longer available to us. So how does this plan, how it's a great concept, but in practice, I'm just seeing that these great ideas don't really get fleshed out. Like also the master plan. I think it's a great idea about having a parks master plan, but we already have an arts master plan that's a 10-year plan, and it just got and the Arts Commission just got defunded this year. Halfway through your arts master plan. So because of the community advocacy and everybody organizing, we were able to restore funding for the annual arts grants, hopefully $100,000. But that shows me that master plans don't really have a lot of pull in the city. So what's it going to matter if we have a parks master plan if in practice we're doing things like defunding the mandates of that plan, which I have already witnessed happening with the Arts Master Plan. So those are my two questions. How are we gonna phase out the heavy industry? Is there plans for that? If we're gonna relocate them, where are we gonna relocate them? And then 3, how's this Arts Master Plan going to work? Seeing that in practice, we're already struggling as a community to retain properties that people want, to to comply with master plans that already exist.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you for your questions, and thank you for joining us again. I know you were present at last night's meeting, so I appreciate your contribution this morning as well. One of the key aspects of environmental justice is try to identify the interface between heavy industrial uses and impacts to sensitive receptors like schools and residential uses. So our key focus would be on looking at this level, at the general plan level, our land use designation of industrial and the types of uses that would be compatible with that land use, and making sure that there was adequate buffering for those areas that are going to continue to be known as industrial. For the other areas, we were introducing a new designator, which is going to be called Flex Industrial, that proposes to have cleaner uses that would be more suitable for areas that are adjacent to these sensitive receptors. In terms of immediate action, we were discussing the follow-up implementation action of enforcement through operational standards for existing operators, and potentially looking at the list of uses permitted in both the light industrial and heavy industrial zones, and finding ways to phase out through either amortization of these uses through, a plan that gives folks an opportunity to relocate within our city to areas outside of these interfaces. And so those are just kind of examples of potential implementation actions that go beyond the general plan, but are included as part of the plan to make sure that we are accountable for those things. And then the second part of your question, I believe, had to do with, what the plans themselves mean. As you mentioned, and I believe others kind of brought up last night, that without a plan, we really don't have a destination. And so this is the beginning of our attempt at trying to curb the issue by responding to it, identifying it, creating a goal and policy to achieve it, and then through an action or a zoning standard or a parks master plan that helps to identify it and then execute it. Your goal of historic preservation is an honorable one. I think others brought up the significance of South Main last night and other key areas in the city that should be preserved. And a potential implementation there could be to do a citywide survey, for example, as part of this historic element, to identify the potential for historic preservation of these key resources. Hopefully that answers your question. Is there any other questions, Melanie?
There are 7 folks that have their hands up, and the next person that actually does want to comment is Katherine Cox.
Hi, thank you. First, I want to thank you, meeting organizers, for being responsive to some of the feedback about accessibility and language access from last night, and being more responsive to some suggestions in the chat about making sure people get the information they need to access the interpretation. I do think there's a lot of room for improvement, but I do want to suggest for this meeting, I know there are some people, some Spanish speakers who are looking to make comments who have said that the interpreter said they're going to post them in the chat. If there's any way to allow a way to make sure people who want to give those comments verbally in Spanish to give a little of extra time to allow so that they can actually get unmuted, give the comments. Part of the reason for this is that many of the interpretations last night were summaries or paraphrases that did not include all the information and the verbatim translations of what was said. So I think going forward, the need for professional hired translators and interpreters is crucial, but for the time being, please allow people to speak in their own words in whatever language they choose to make their comments so that that can be fully reflected on the record. Thank you so much.
Bernie, if I, oh, sorry. Sorry, Bernie, if I could interject for a moment. Catherine reminded me that we wanted to ask all those that are speaking to speak slow so that that translation can be better translated. Thank you.
Great, great. Catherine, thank you for your comments, and we would be happy to accommodate the request to have those folks speak their comments into the meeting here today. One other thing that I want to remind folks of is I'd like an opportunity for all new speakers to speak as well. I know we've had some folks that had the opportunity to attend last night's session to speak up. We have some limited time, but I really wanted to afford those folks that haven't had a chance to comment to speak and provide commentary. So just keep that in mind. You know, we don't really want to say you're limited to a specific time, but we just want to practice common sense here and try to get everyone, give everyone an opportunity to provide their feedback. So thank you for that.
Bernie, if you'd like to allow those that have not spoken yet, Gail Fosler would be the next speaker.
Thank you, Gail. Good morning.
Okay, hello, thank you. I am a owner of a business in the Warner industrial community. This is a community that was formed in 2015 to partner with the city of Santa Ana on an assessment district, both north and south of Warner and west of Fairview. You may be familiar with it. And our area is included along with the park and a section of residential area in one of the environmental justice zones. Okay. I'm very active in our community of both mostly small business, light industry, some manufacturing, and also a series of condominiums that basically house small businesses. And I received a flyer from a realtor who got one of your flyers several weeks ago, which is why I'm attending this meeting. And I just wonder if you can provide any more detail as to what it is you're really talking about when you're talking about redefining light industry and relocating light and heavy industry, because there are many of us in this industrial real estate market who simply could not continue to operate if we were forced to relocate because of the relative rise in the cost of industrial property. So if you could just give me some idea of what it is you're envisioning,
Sure,
that would be great.
Well, good morning, Gail, and thank you for your contribution and investment in our city. We have done some outreach to our Chamber of Commerce and had a special focus area discussion down there on Dyer Avenue, where we attempted to reach out to our business community on the east side. Specifically to your question relating to industrial uses and the potential cleanup of those uses, what we're really talking about here are the bad operators, the one or two bad apples that are really not playing by the rules. There are several agencies involved with the regulation of industrial users. And so what we're talking about is ensuring that these users are held accountable for their emissions effectively. In terms of uses, the majority of the uses down at the Warner area there are kind of a light industrial, kind of flex office type of use. We're talking about heavy industrial uses in this case. So
thank you.
That hopefully answers your question.
Say that the reconstruction of the infrastructure had a desired effect because so many of the businesses have upgraded their properties subsequently, but we think we're on a good path and we want to continue to be so, because offering, a lot of us are manufacturers that offer good paying jobs, and we think we're making a an important contribution to the city of Santa Ana. So thank you.
Thank you for your question. Melanie?
The next speaker would be Sarah Marquez.
Hi, good morning, Sarah.
I was just, this might be a separate, for a different time, but I'm part of a community-based organization, and I know you're looking to have more involvement. If we are interested, who do we contact as a community-based organization?
Sure. Sarah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your organization and ways you feel you might be able to contribute to the plan.
Yes, sure. So I'm I'm the community and program outreach manager for Straight Talk Counseling Center. We are located off of Bristol. We actually got this flyer directly to us. So we provide low cost mental health support. And I know one of the things you guys are focusing more is on the health aspect. I heard a lot of things more about physical, but our approach is physical is as important as mental, and with the stresses of COVID and everything going on, we've noticed an increase in needing support for employees, clients, or other organizations and whatnot. So I didn't want this necessarily to be a plug for our organization.
Sure. No, I just
wanted to know if we were interested in helping support these initiatives, how we would go about contacting, who would be the right person to contact.
Right. No, thank you for that background. We do have, as I mentioned, a core value of health, and what I'd like you to do is just pay close attention to the future element, which is going to be called community. In that community element are going to be sections pertaining to social health and facilities, and the folks that improve our community from a social aspect, if you will, and a psychological aspect. So there are goals and policies that would then become implementation actions to further our efforts in that area. So if you'd like to contribute, there's a general plan link that I'll provide at the end of this presentation. And then I'll also ask Melanie McCann, who's on the line, to reach out to you and provide an email address where you can send us your comments. Thank you.
The next speaker would be Asuri Ramos.
Hi, good morning, Asuri.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So I have two questions, and the first one is in regards to the community-led economic development policy. So I had also typed it in the chat, and the question is, how does the city plan to incorporate and protect street vendors within this community-led economic development policy? And when I say street vendors, I also want to make sure we're including food trucks. And then the second question is, what efforts are being made to reach Santa Ana residents within these focus areas and that would be affected by any general plan changes that do not have internet access and cannot join via webinar? So I know there was a response saying that they received flyers, but my concern is that if this flyer is for a webinar they cannot join, then that flyer is useless to them.
Right. I appreciate your comments. Hopefully, to answer your first question, the city's been fairly responsive when it comes to street vending. As a result of COVID, for example, recently we opened up the opportunity for street vendors to have operations on private property and certain public property as well, subject to registration by the city. So I think this new trend of having more pop-up type of businesses and other unique type of retail establishments are kind of where the future is headed right now. We're kind of midpoint through this general plan, as I mentioned, but there's always opportunities to create implementation that speaks directly to these types of businesses. So I think this would be a great comment to add as part of implementation to make sure that we cover that in our strategy. And then your second question had to do with just outreach efforts. You're correct in that we try to go the extra mile, specifically with environmental justice, after we heard it was a big concern, and throughout our initial process to offer translation services. We even had a member of the public that was, Spanish speaking as part of our general plan advisory group. We provided translation services for all 14 meetings, which lasted 2 hours in length at some times. And we were trying to be as equitable when it came to inclusion of our sensitive residents or those that typically do not have access. The flyer itself was intended to reach folks by mail, and then provided things like phone numbers where technology is extra, but folks today, for example, are reaching us via phone, and that could listen in as they're able to. Another takeaway we learned from our community outreach was that although our city generally isn't economically as well off as other cities, most folks in our city do have at a minimum a smart device and smartphone. So we've been able to make sure that our future general plan is optimized for viewing on smart devices and phones, which hopefully folks can access meetings. I know me personally right now, I'm on my cell phone conducting this meeting because my laptop's acting up. So, I know folks with smartphones are able to access the meeting today. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Bernie. And just quickly on the street vendors, so I know that the city has been very flexible with a lot of the restaurants in the downtown area and allowing them to now operate outside. But when I say street vendors, I'm specifically thinking about our traditional street vendors. So folks whose only source of income is pushing a cart down the street, selling ice cream, selling corn, selling anything else that they can. So I want to make sure that as the city moves forward, that we're thinking about them in a very intentional way to ensure that they're also incorporated and protected by any new policies, knowing that they don't always have the same access to everything else that established Santa Ana businesses do.
Thank you for that clarification. I know you mentioned food trucks, but the city has a pretty robust street vendor permit program. And I know maybe there's some potential to look at that and ways to expand it throughout the city. I know it's limited to our downtown right now. So I appreciate your comment today.
Our next speaker in line would be Victor Payan.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hey, Victor.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this. And it's a really important process. This is the plan that's going to define the future of the city for the next 20 years or so. And I wanted to just address some things that I heard today to really applaud the priorities of health and equity and historic neighborhood character, and to really use that as the guiding vision for what the residents want from the city that they invested to live in, whether it's 30 years ago or today. So I know there's talk about where we can go, but to really listen to the residents about what they need from the city that they call home, not that the future residents might call home. And specifically, I'm hearing a lot about a heavy industry and about high-end luxury high-density residencies, but I'm not hearing about technology, and I think that really is where we need to be looking for the future. Some of these standard categories might have been applicable also in like the 1970s, but there's so much we could do with technology to activate South Main with dark fiber, to turn it, like I said, into a South Main art, retail, and technology district, to attract those kinds of green businesses that can also be very large. You can have data server farms. I know that Blizzard wanted to relocate here, to really bring in that kind of new industry and set the standard. I heard a representative for industry real estate saying that land is expensive everywhere else, so they really need it to be cheap in Santa Ana. Residents don't want to hear that. Residents want to be as competitive as the other cities, so we're not the dumping ground for toxic industries like we are. We're like the other cities kind of legislate out homelessness, so they send them all here. We can't do that for technology or for residences. So things like community technology centers, we heard about the need for libraries, and we heard about the need for parks and public spaces, but there's a real lack of places where kids can go and just get internet to do their homework or to write their families, or now that we're in the COVID and we're seeing that people have to stay home from school, there is no infrastructure for that. And so we can be the leaders in doing that, to have Wi-Fi access points and internet cafes. It's funny that whenever I hear a cyber cafe mentioned in the news, it's some weird gambling establishment, you know, busted. But a real internet cafe is a place where you can get coffee, where you can go do your homework, where you can write a script, and it's accessible to people who are under 21. You know, we have a lot of entertainment spaces for 21 and up, but there's a serious need to all over the city to address those cultural and professional needs of our youth and our young adults who don't want to go to bars, you know, who just need to get work done. You know, places that are standard, a lot of other, in a lot of other cities, like, you know, where you can rent cubicles to work. I know they have some in other cities, but even a more public version of that, where you can just sit at a desk and do your work, you know, and it's really, really needed all over the city. We really need to invest in a cultural sector. That's something I'm not seeing in the plan yet either. I know there's a cultural component, but I really don't see any cultural people on the advisory group. And the reason that makes a difference is because when you put in live theaters and cafes and performance spaces and youth organizations and dance studios, you bring in a lot of people from all over the county. It becomes a destination for families, for kids, but then they also go out and spend money everywhere else. And I know that in the downtown, you know, 5-10 years ago, there were more theaters, there were more independent galleries and cultural spaces, and it was really thriving. And you don't see that anymore. I mean, there's a lot of bars, but honestly, that chases out a lot of young people. And so we really need to invest in that. If it's not going to happen in the downtown, it needs to be in the plan that it happens elsewhere, because that will drive the vitality, and it will give, you know, places for the next generation to develop their skills and their professional capacity and to do commerce. And I, you know, looking, like I said, at the advisory group, I don't see that it's really representative of the needs of the residents. I see, you know, a lot of planning people and business people who might not live here, but we really need to have that resident voice heard. You mentioned that the advisory group had 14 meetings and some were 2 hours. We need to give the residents that kind of input also. I know that yesterday people, like almost everybody, was asking for the plan timeline to be extended. I think that's a smart move, and would recommend that as well. And also to recommend that there be a Spanish language presentation where the primary call-in component is in Spanish, because I agree with previous callers. Yesterday when I tried to call in, I didn't know whether to call in by Zoom or phone or go to. If you just make it one specific thing for people to go to, then you have 100% access.
Thank you, Victor. You know, I appreciate your comments, and I don't mean to be dismissive. One thing I'd like to do is continue with our presentation here, because we're kind of running short on time, and I know some of the items that you're bringing up have been previously discussed and identified. So if you have a few closing comments, I'll go ahead and let you wrap up. Victor, yeah, you want to just wrap up there?
I muted myself. Yeah, I think just the importance, like I said, of technology and arts and culture, of being a driving force for the kind of vision that a lot of people want Santa Ana to follow through on. And the city has made really great investments that we just need to move forward to bring that into the 21st century. And have a culture meeting.
Thank you for your comments, Victor. And we will make sure to incorporate those as part of this conversation. All right, with that, if we're going to hold the question and answers to the end of the presentation here as we get through the next series of slides. So the first part of our conversation covered the topics that were of key consideration to the city. The next series of slides summarizes some of the land use alternatives as we start to narrow in on portions of our community that have been identified as focus areas. These focus areas were identified early on with the work of the General Plan Advisory Group, and then followed up by information provided to the community through online surveys and individual workshops in each of the following focus areas that we're going to cover here. Following those workshops and surveys, there were one-on-one city council meetings with electeds to further distill the information that was received from the community, as well as comparison of our general core values and regional goals that resulted in the following slide. If I can get the slide, please. All right, so this next map covers in context existing plan areas that you see on the bottom of the slide in blue. I'm not going to cover them all in detail, but on the left side, you see Harbor Plan. In the center of your screen, you see North Main Street and South Main Street. And then on the east side, you have the Midtown Plan and the recently adopted Metro East Overlay Use Zone. And then to the north, we have our main place specific plan that was recently adopted. The 5 focus areas that you see in pink on the top of the screen represent areas that collectively were identified to create a series of linkages between these existing plan areas. There's been a lot of conversation about development that we're getting around our city, adjacent to Tustin, Irvine, Costa Mesa, and our other cities that want to capitalize on our location. However, there was a need to look also within our core of the city to find opportunities to link our community, either through future streetcar lines or through transit-oriented segments to start to link these plans so they start to make sense with one another. And so that's how we came up with this plan of focus areas in terms of a plan to link these mixed-use communities. So the first is South Main Street on the south, which serves to create an extension of our downtown in the center of the screen. Number 2 would be the Grand Avenue and 17th Street focus area that initially began with just a corner of a node of 17th and Grand, but following subsequent conversations to capitalize on proximity to regional connectors like SR22 and the 5 freeway to the south in our downtown, was expanded north-south. The next focus area is the West Santa Ana Boulevard focus area that serves to connect our downtown and follows the trajectory of our streetcar. Next, on number 4, is the 55 Dyer Road area that really wants to highlight the capacity for some of Victor's previous comments, would have to do with the city's regional position as a leader in biotech and medical and research and development. So that 55 area was of paramount importance to folks, especially given some of the existing commercial uses like our Hotel Circle area, and how can we expand that focus area specifically. And then our last 5th focus area is South Bristol Street. In blue, you see the terminus of the South Bristol Street corridor, the Bristol Street corridor plan that runs north from Memory Lane down to Warner Avenue on the south. And this new focus area wants to create a natural transition from Warner Avenue down to the city south southerly boundary and capitalize on some of the success of that South Coast Village area. So these next series of slides are going to cover some specifics on each of the focus areas. If I can get the next slide, please. All right, so this first focus area that I briefly touched on is South Main Street. And South Main Street intends to extend our southerly boundary of our downtown by facilitating redevelopment of properties that exist along downtown and have opportunities for more active and dynamic streetscapes, realize a more intense multi-story frontage along the corridor. And by frontage, I mean looking for opportunities for things like missing middle housing, like you see on the slide on the bottom left there, and looking at opportunities for additional uses on sites that might have commercial storefronts currently existing, not to replace those uses, but to add additional opportunities for either mixed use or reuse of those buildings that are currently underutilized. And then capitalizing on that transit-oriented, non-motorized travel of this area. If we continue to the next slide, please, we'll look at some of the land use classifications together. One of the clarifications I'd like to make from last night's conversation was in the yellow, we see low density residential. Those are existing neighborhoods and they're in the focus area because when we plan for areas, we don't just plan along corridors, but we need to look at adjacency to what we're planning. In this case, the areas in yellow aren't proposed for any change. However, they're just included as part of the focus area so that we as planners are mindful of development standards that would be applicable to the new land use designation. In this case is in purple for urban neighborhood, which would allow heights of up to 3 stories along Main Street. and allow uses, as I mentioned, single, multifamily housing, mixed use residential, and allow for a mixture of retail and service uses. This is one of our most densely populated portions of the city, east and west. These neighborhoods have prime opportunity to create walkable communities into these key neighborhoods for folks to have shopping and dining experiences along the corridor, as well as places to live. The next slide speaks to our existing light industrial area. I know we had a representative of the business community here. This is an example of an area that is currently industrial. This is looking southeast from Broadway and Warner Avenue. It shows a single-story industrial use. And this is an area where we feel there could be creative manufacturing and worker spaces to try to achieve kind of some of the previous speakers' callers in research and development, as well as maker spaces for our creative businesses, for our small manufacturers, for our artists, to have shopkeeper type of units in this area. So if you look at the next slide, it gives you a conceptual drawing of what that corner could transform into. You see some residential mixed use at the rear of the site, and in the foreground you see some activity at the first level and some additional R&D uses on the second level there. Next slide, please. Our next focus area this morning is Grand and 17th Street. As I mentioned, the intent for Grand and 17th with that 22 freeway is to create opportunities to redevelop this as a mixed-use corridor and create urban villages that are a bit more intense, multi-story along the corridor. In this case, the land use of urban, we'll have to wait till the next slide on that. Up to 3 stories in height of urban neighborhood would promote infill development and respect established neighborhoods, foster community spaces, and develop opportunities for live work, again, artist spaces and small scale manufacturing along the railroad right-of-way, where we have existing industrial uses today, and maintain compatible nodes of commercial activity. The next slide. The next slide indicates here the land use plan for that focus area. As you see in light purple is the urban neighborhood I was trying to get out, which is up to 4 stories in height in this focus area. And then additional allowances for improvements to our general commercial areas, which are in red. And that industrial flex, as you see the small sliver adjacent to the railroad right-of-way there. And to the south of the Fry Freeway, you see an opportunity for District Center, creating a linkage to our downtown and affording some opportunities for some more gateway uses that are a bit more higher intensity, which would complement our downtown areas. Next slide, please. All right, this slide that you see would be an actual example of a neighborhood just northwest of this specific focus area. Shows the context of a single family dwelling with existing commercial in the rear. And the next slide illustrates what the urban neighborhood land use could result in from a new development, for example. The intent through zoning standards here would be to create buffers in height and visual and aesthetic impacts to these residential neighborhoods by creating development standards and setbacks that would minimize intrusion into our single family residential areas and serve to be respectful of those neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Our next focus area lies along the Santa Ana Boulevard streetcar trajectory. The goal here is to look at transit-oriented development through multi-story housing mixed-use opportunities near the streetcar stations, specifically at the streetcar stops, promoting infill development, and again, being respectful to our established neighborhoods. This is a theme that you'll see consistent in our focus areas. You know, through the years, we've had development projects interspersed through our community, and the community resoundingly has had issues with the potential for impacts to their neighborhood. So we wanted to be mindful of making sure that we're preserving these neighborhoods. By buffering the industrial land uses in residential neighborhoods through development standards, we can at the same time create opportunities for clean industrial and maker spaces. Next slide, please. This is a sample of the potential land use plan out there. One thing I want to clarify is the difference between a land use plan and a zoning document. This is the groundwork for future land use zoning that could occur on the property. So the menu, if you will, of land uses here would be general commercial, administrative office. Again, making an attempt at introducing industrial flex to help phase out some heavy industrial uses, especially near our single family areas. Institutional, which covers government facilities and our downtown, these public service facilities and other institutions. And then open space, as you see in our focus area, is Willowick, where there's going to be a future streetcar stop. Next slide, please. This focus area also includes existing and proposed land use designations in terms of residential. Low density residential would remain as existing. There would be a provision for low medium residential, which would allow small lot subdivisions, which in normal terms means small lots with homes that folks can own. Not only the building, kind of like you do in a condo, but you actually own the lot below you as well. So you own the lot plus the building that the development is built on. So another sort of housing that has become more prevalent these days. Medium density residential, corridor residential to capitalize on the prime location of the streetcar, and then additional urban neighborhood in areas proximal to the streetcar stops. The next slide gives a photo of an existing setting here at, I believe this is 3rd and Townsend Street. There's a Superior Market on the south of this. If we're looking northbound towards the right-of-way, there's some existing industrial uses on the west here. You see a rock quarry in the back, adjacent to a single-family neighborhood across the street that's been there many years. The next photo shows the introduction of that clean flex industrial with more office, clean R&D types of uses adjacent to and maintaining and being respectful of that single family neighborhood across the street. Please be aware that these are just conceptual renderings. This doesn't represent an actual development that's happening next week, next month. When we do these plans, we try to anticipate what the street would look like. So in advance of a development happening, we want it to be as clear as possible with members of the public so they understood from a context standpoint what their neighborhood potentially could look like. And these simulations help us to convey that. But this isn't a development project that is being proposed today. This is just a conceptual drawing. Next slide. Next slide is I'm going to cover the 55 freeway and Dyer Road area. Over the years, we've had various applications for multifamily development in this focus area, but we wanted to think beyond additional residential development here and capitalize on, as I mentioned previously, the prime investment potential as a gateway to our city. Other cities like the city of Irvine, Fountain Valley are taking their freeway frontage and making it known that they are open for business and open for gateway and industrial biotech type of uses that want to locate headquarters to make more of a statement when folks are entering the city. As you know, when you're traveling northbound or southbound on the 55 freeway, there's a lot of potential there that we see that is underutilized along that corridor that could significantly be improved. Together with that, we intend here to create opportunities for additional industrial office employment and how we can enhance our existing hotel circle and commercial users in this area. I know we had a speaker that represented this focus area earlier today. I think it was Gail. So here we have the next slide, please. We have, just like in the other focus areas, an example of the plan. And the dark purple is and adjacent to Red Hill Avenue would be additional high-density urban villages, which would allow for more residential development and capacity for growth for our city, but being mindful of things like our shopping establishments and restaurants, and looking at opportunities for entertainment in conjunction with that residential addition. And then sandwiched between the two and located on the 55 corridor there would be that prime location for office, industrial, gateway, R&D, clean manufacturing, as one of our speakers spoke about earlier today, corporate headquarters, and those types of campuses along the 55 to showcase and make our residents proud of being Santa Ana residents. Next slide, please. So this vantage point shows an artistic view looking from the 55 north, a relatively low scale of development on either side of the freeway. And then in the background, you see the Tustin Legacy and County of Orange properties on this slide. So the next slide serves to illustrate some of the concepts that we just discussed, taking advantage of an artist's rendering of the potential for gateway, industrial, and office uses with the residential multi-story at the rear adjacent to Red Hill Avenue. Now, this is a lot to take in here, so I want to just give folks a few seconds to look at the slide while I catch my breath. All right, our next focus area, and the next slide, please, is South Bristol Street. Here, we were discussing the opportunity that presents itself with our neighbor to the south. The South Coast metro area is in Santa Ana. But also to the south is the city of Costa Mesa. And there are some multi-story buildings at our city edge, together with some fine arts facilities and performing arts venues that would introduce the potential for some mixed-use urban villages that could become destinations for experiential commercial uses, is what the term is, walkable, bike-friendly, and transit-oriented. So this would be a destination where, you know, some of the residents would jump in their car and actually come and spend an afternoon or evening in one of these areas, versus some of the other focus areas where folks could walk from their community to this area. This would be more of an auto-centered regional destination where you could do like a one-stop shop, maybe, you know, have a bite to eat, or go watch a movie, or you know, meet with some friends for a social gathering, or, you know, visit, you know, one of the facilities in this area. The next slide shows a land use plan that would be respectful of those uses on the north side on Warner Avenue to Alton, and be limited in height with the urban neighborhood designation of 3 stories in height, and then tiered up from Alton Avenue as we approach the city's boundary to MacArthur Avenue, from up to 10 stories in height for district center. And then a bit more intensity And this is a result of some of the feedback we received in some of our land use discussions, where we did receive feedback that people were actually pretty comfortable in going a little taller on our south side between MacArthur and Sunflower to capitalize on the gateway potential on Bristol Street as we enter our city, up to 25 stories in height. I know that's a big number, but we're going to show you some slides here that kind of show the context of some of those existing buildings. So the next slide, please. So this slide shows the existing single story. In this case, it's a Buffalo Wild Wings, and we're looking southeast at Bristol Street and Kalen's Common. Single story, mid-century, 70s, 60s, commercial strip center. As you know, with COVID and some of the economic times, a lot of these storefronts are having issues kind of continuing to stay in business. So we're trying to think ahead. This plan is about future visions, not only today, but tomorrow, and what we can do to maintain a competitive advantage with our other cities, and to make sure that we have facilities and destinations for our residents without having them leave our community. Next slide, please. So this is an intense rendering of showing the maximum capacity. This isn't necessarily what would be built. However, an illustrative view of something in the 10 or 15 story height to show you what that would look like adjacent to some of those buildings in the rear that exist today for the South Bristol Street corridor focus area. All right, and what is our next slide, please? Okay, so we've reached the end of the focus area discussion. What I want to do now is kind of talk about the next steps. We're at a critical point right now where we're getting ready to release the environmental impact report for public review and our general plan draft in the coming days and weeks. What we wanted to do is let the community know that this is a public review process that is not going to begin right now, but it's going to begin shortly. There's going to be a 45-day review period for the environmental document, which is the technical document. The EIR is intended to identify potential impacts from this proposed project, which in this case is the development that could result in these 5 focus areas, and how that potentially could have impacts in different areas. So I encourage you to review that technical document and provide feedback, as well as feedback on individual elements that we're going to release. There's going to be 12 of them released here for you to review and provide comment on. There's going to be multiple opportunities to participate, multiple city council study sessions, which are different than the adoption hearings. Study sessions are open to the public, where you can come just like you did, took the time today to come in and listen or provide comment directly to your elected officials on your suggestions, your revisions to the plan, which is currently in draft format, on August 18th. And the next meeting after that for Planning Commission will be August 24th. Our intended path right now is for adoption in the fall of this year. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you for staying with me. We're going to open up for questions now.
Vernie, we have 5 people that have their hands up for questioning, 2 of which have not spoken before. First one being, let's see, Rodrigo Rea.
Hi, good morning, Rodrigo.
Rodrigo, are you self-muted by chance?
He wouldn't do it. Got him. Don't do anything.
Rodrigo, have you tried to unmute your computer?
You now you so don't hit anything.
Rodrigo?
Just go back to him.
We may need to go back to Rodrigo and see if we can sort out the sound system there. The next person would be Alicia Salgado.
Hi, Alicia. Good morning. Are you there?
Alicia, is your phone or computer muted? It says attendee is self-muted.
Melanie, can you make an announcement, please, to ensure folks kind of understand how to use the tool? And I just want to make sure that they understand that there's an opportunity to mute and unmute to have their question heard.
Aló, mi nombre es Alicia Salgado, pertenezco a Neighbor Association Madison Park. Está muy bien sus estrategias, sin embargo, sugiero que tengan un meeting con los líderes comunitarios para que escuchen nuestras perspectivas y tengan una equidad entre tecnología, industria, gobierno, cultura, comunidad y sobre todo justicia ambiental, ya que deben de tener en cuenta ya en el plan general estrategias donde establecer las industrias de contaminantes tóxicos y alejarlos de nuestras comunidades, ya que sí afectan a las escuelas y a los hogares de las comunidades de aquí de Santa Ana. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Alicia. Just sort of summarize, Alicia's a Madison Park resident. She's in favor in some of the proposed changes here, but would like some additional time for the Madison Park neighborhood to process some of these changes. And she wanted to be especially cautious of industrial uses in our city and ways that we can continue to improve the situation for the residents of Madison Park in the city. All right, next question, please.
We can try Rodrigo again. Go ahead, Rodrigo.
Sounds like Rodrigo's having some issues communicating. I believe we have the chat function available. Can you confirm that, Melanie? If Rodrigo, if you're listening, if you can type your comment, we'd be happy to read it aloud. And while you do that or unmute yourself, we'll take another caller, Melanie.
Very good. The next caller would be Marty Peterson.
Hi, good morning, Marty.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Obviously, if we're successful with this general plan over time, we will end up with a lot more residents and workers and visitors to the city. And being that some of the freeways are severely impacted now, especially the 55, where, at key transit times, it sends a lot of traffic that wouldn't normally go through town, right through town. There are freeway and city street expansion plans that are also being made to support this.
Does that conclude your comment? All right, well, thank you for your comment. You are correct. The EIR, or the city's environmental impact report, will serve to identify traffic capacity along our key arterial roadways, as well as our general roadways. It will also identify exact number of housing units, jobs, and our growth. It will also identify a few alternatives for growth. So I encourage you to review those documents. They are intended to be released early next week. The environmental document will be released, as I mentioned, on the 3rd of August, and we welcome your comments on that. Thank you. Melanie, are there other questions?
Certainly. The next caller would be Natalie Sierra.
Hi, Natalie, are you there?
Natalie, you should be free to speak. We don't,
Can you
we're
guys
not
hear me
hearing
now?
from that. Oh,
Yes, is that you, Natalie?
Yes.
Hi, good morning, thank you.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Natalie. I'm 15 years old, and my family has lived in the Madison Park neighborhood for over 20 years, and we've always been really involved in everything that happens in our community. I became an official member of the Guala Environmental Justice Committee in April of last year, and I very quickly became interested in the kind of work that we do, which in part is to fight for those in our community who don't have the means necessary to speak up for the injustices they face. We want to give our community the opportunity to be heard and to give them a say in what happens in our city. And I believe that everyone should have the right to speak freely, feel needed in their community, and have opportunities to better the future. And so I asked for the delay of the general plan process to include community input. As we have learned over the course of several months, the Madison Park neighborhood has been gravely affected by pollution and contaminants coming from major industrial establishments, the majority of which happen to be placed near schools, home, and recreational areas. Data collected over the past few years has shown how our neighborhood and our city has seen an increase in the severity and the number of asthma cases amongst the residents, and there has been a direct correlation between the presence of these industries and the worsening of health in Madison Park, mostly due to the fact that the policies within our city's general plan aren't strict enough to prevent those sort of issues from happening. Much of the city does is tell us what they plan to do and how they plan to do it, but oftentimes they ask for questions that we have on what is already written rather than let the residents provide thoughts and feedbacks on drafts or ideas before they are finalized. So once again, my request is for the city to please take into account that we, as citizens of Santa Ana, should not be left in the dark, and that we also need to have a say in what happens around here. This way, we can ensure that nobody gets left unheard, and everyone gets the opportunity to improve our neighborhood, our city, and our future. So I urge you to please consider our requests and ensure that we are not left unnoticed by our government as it pertains to the issues that matter most. Thank you.
Natalie, I commend you. You sound like a very knowledgeable young person, and I just want to thank you for taking the time, at 15 years old to be so articulate and interested in a plan like ours that to most folks isn't as exciting as it is to us. But your comments are not taken lightly. They're important because we see our youth as the future of this plan, and the reason we're planning for the future is for folks like you, our future leaders, to make sure that your voices are heard and that the ideas are aligned with where the city's headed. So I applaud you, and I appreciate your feedback today.
Okay, thank you.
Melanie,
We're
are
going
we
to try
on?
Rodrigo Rea one more time, see if we
All right.
can open up that communication.
Hi, Rodrigo. Rodrigo, are you there? Can we check the chat area, Melanie, to see if there's any written comments that Rodrigo might have provided?
But yes.
Rodrigo has not written a question, and for some reason we're showing him as self-muted. So again, we'll go on to one other caller and come back and try again. Another caller would be Maria de Los Angeles Diaz.
Hi, good morning, Maria.
Go ahead, Maria. We can move on to another speaker,
Go ahead, Melanie.
Lorena Sona. Soraya.
Hi, Lorena, are you with us?
Lorena, can you unmute on your end, please?
Melanie, let me explain how people
Thank you.
can mute and unmute themselves. So if you guys are using your phone, you should have an icon on the top, either like the hand icon or, you know, the question mark icon or a little mic icon. So if you can click on that, it should give you the option to unmute once we let you unmute yourself. Si están usando la aplicación de GoToWebinar y si quieren hablar y levantaron la mano, van a ver una foto de un micrófono que va a estar arriba de su teléfono, va a estar al lado de donde levanta su mano y donde se puede hacer las preguntas. Y entonces cuando llamemos su nombre, va a poder oprimir esa imagen y va a poder hablar. And on the desktop, it should be on the top right corner. It should be like a red icon that you can click to make it green in order for you to speak and unmute yourself. So hopefully that clarifies some of the questions. I know people were having issues. Once we say your name and we let you know that you can click to unmute, that's when you'll have the option to unmute yourself. All right, thank you.
Lorena, would you like to try again, please? I think we'll go on then to check in with Steve Delgados.
Hi, good morning, Steve. Are you there?
Hello?
Hi, Steve.
Hi, it's Steve Gallegos.
Hi, good morning, Steve. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. So I had a couple of questions. One of the things I remember during the last, one of the last city council meetings, you guys were directed by Councilmember Peñalosa to make sure you guys reach out to the community because I think that the person who actually was giving the presentation, he had said that there had been some outreach, but it wasn't broad enough. So it didn't reach as many people as it really should be, especially when it pertains to building these really large multi-level kind of residences next to what historically have been single family homes. And I found your guys' link on the santaana.org website, but one of the things is I want to know, what did you guys do different this time around to ensure that more people actually are listening to this or watching this presentation? Because again, even just with the amount of callers, there isn't that many people tuning in, and I know for a fact that it's not something that people are uninterested in. It's just that there's no connectivity when it comes to social media, kind of connecting to the right social media accounts or pages and saying, hey, can you guys please put this out there? We need people's input, because I live here on Bristol Warner, and just to think that there might be a 3-story, residential, apartment complex or something like that right up against, across the street from me. I'm thinking about, we're already dealing with all the dust and all the things that are coming just from widening the street. And now I'm going to have a few more years of that once that starts rolling. The other thing too is that the traffic is going to be insane. There's so many things, and then just the density of that population. I've seen other places that have these complexes and just everything that comes with it, the parking, the noise, the just everything that comes with kind of putting a bunch of people together. So, I'm interested in, why is my neighborhood different from, let's say, putting a resident, a multi-level apartment complex next to, let's say, somewhere like Floral Park. My house is, we're paying $500,000-$600,000 for these homes, and granted, they're not the $1 million homes over there, but they are. We worked really hard for these houses too. We worked really hard for these areas. So I just kind of feel like you guys, there's not enough outreach to the community here, because you guys are butting up that possibility. I know that it doesn't mean that those essentially will go there, but the possibility will become open. And I can't imagine that, that businesses won't take advantage of that. I think it should be pushed towards more South Coast area, because again, you already see those big buildings there. I think that's more of an appropriate area. I just feel like here, I look at all my neighbors, and almost every single one of them, they own their own homes. They're single family residences. And just to, again, reiterate all the issues that come with having so many people congregate in one area, it's going to spill over inevitably to us. So
I appreciate your comments. I think they're well received. I have a quick question for you on how you were informed of this meeting, and then that's the first part of it. I'm interested to see how you found out about the meeting, and then part B, before we respond and explain to you kind of how we reached out to our community. Do you have any suggestions on how we can improve?
yeah, so the way I found you guys is I've only recently gotten pretty active on going that santaana.org website, and I was just clicking through the links, like kind of one by one. And when I came across your guys' link, I was just like, oh, I was like, what is this? So actually, when I clicked on it yesterday, I clicked on it probably around 8 p.m. or it was the very last bit of your guys' meeting. I was just like, okay, well, then I'll go ahead and I'll sign up for the next one, which was today. And just even hearing, for example, from the callers that you guys had, and I only was able to, I only signed on an hour later, actually. I signed on like around 11. So for you guys to only have 5 callers at that point, it really shows that the communication between you guys and the community, it's not that they're not interested, is that something is happening within the communication that people are not receiving this information. Because five callers to have on the phone, even if it grew to 10 callers, when you're talking about a city that has 300,000 people, that's not a huge turnout. And it can't just be simply that people are uninterested, because when the city council meetings come, you start seeing so many people kind of show up. So my recommendation is, I think you guys should hook up to these Instagram sites that do have a lot of followers, that are from Santa Ana. There's not just the Santa Ana, the city of Santa Ana, obviously that's the one that belongs to the city of Santa Ana, but there's a lot of other ones. I know they sound funny, but they have like, Santa Ana problems, or they have neighbors of Santa Ana, or they have all of these different pages that are linked to thousands of people, and there's so much visibility within these groups. So, and these are they're active people, but again, like I was talking to one of the council members, I said, it's not that people are not interested. It's that people don't speak your guys' jargon. People don't actively go to santaana.org. They don't understand if someone says, hey, we're making some changes to the charter. People don't even know what the word charter means. So to say, hey, this is going to be a general plan, people have no awareness even what to associate that with, because they've never heard that before. So something in plain English, something that the layman, someone like me who could understand, is saying, hey, we want to change the way this city looks by adding big buildings, by adding some commercial properties. They're going to change areas of what used to be for single family residences. We're going to ask to see what you guys think about putting big buildings here, in plain English, that the regular resident can understand. So that would be my suggestion.
I appreciate your feedback. I think there's definitely always room for improvement. As I mentioned, we made an effort at trying to reach out to folks by mail, especially given the current health crisis that we have, and try to create as many avenues as possible for folks to participate, both on our website and online. I know the city has an Instagram page. I'm not very active with Instagram, but I know some of our staff is familiar with that. So let us go back, with our team to make sure that we can expand where feasible outreach efforts. Melanie, is there anything you wanted to add? I know Melanie is part of our general plan team, and she's been working hard to get the word out on this. Do you have any comments, Melanie?
I would just add that we've been working with our public information officer to use social media as much as possible. The Nextdoor tool, Instagram, Facebook, the array of social media. And I think the caller was recommending that maybe at least with relates to Instagram, there's layers of it that we could
Sure.
pursue.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your comments this morning. Thank you.
We'd like to try again for Rodrigo Rea, and at this point, we're going to open the line for Christina to hopefully allow Rodrigo to pass through that.
Miss, I'm sorry. You guys said you guys would answer the second part of my question.
Melanie, I believe he's just asking how we reached out and what we did in addition to the outreach here and what avenues we used for this meeting. Is that your question?
Well, I mean, there was that part of the question, but that was the first part of my question. The second part was essentially.
Oh, right. Okay. Talking about the location and proximity to other neighborhoods. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So each of our focus areas has specific opportunities, if you will. I know, as I mentioned, we have projects that are proximal to adjacent cities, but there's also opportunities in our city's core to create these linkages. The plan intends to create transitions between existing plan areas and new plan areas. And so there are different varying heights and scale of land use designations that apply to these focus areas based on their context and in certain cases the depth of the lots that exist. I'll use Bristol Street as an example. Some of those lots have 150, 200, 300 feet of depth, where along Main Street, some of our lots are only 100 feet, 120 feet in depth. So the planning of these areas are not intended to create consequences to specific areas, but are trying to respond to some physical aspects of the focus areas, adjacency to transit stops, for example, on our streetcar alignment. And then on the north, main segment and along the North Grand areas, we're trying to be mindful of the auto-oriented connections between the 22 freeway, and then being mindful of opportunity areas like at the gateway where people exit on the 5 freeway as they enter our downtown, where it makes sense that investment could realistically land. So I'm not sure if that answers your question completely, but that's the premise behind the plan. Thank you for your question. Melanie, can we get the next caller?
Certainly. So again, we'll try for Rodrigo Rea.
So, hi, Melanie. This is Jose Rea, and I just wanted to clarify that yes, my wife and we spoke yesterday, and today we have 3 devices. My son, Jose Pepe, is also on a device, and Rodrigo was on his own device that he couldn't unmute. So that was an issue, but Rodrigo was able to type his comments, and so they were sent to you via chat. But Bernie, I wanted to just sort of like ask you if you could please go to slide number 10, because I have an invitation for you and your department and also our elected officials, but I wanted to just kind of like, if you can go to the timeline that you have on slide number 10. That one, thank you so much. So I wanted to kind of like give you a little bit background, and I'm not going to take a lot of time. I know that it's limited and there's more people that want to talk. But as you know, the Madison Park Neighborhood Association, and I'm currently the treasurer, has been part of the Santa Ana Building Healthy Communities since its inception 10 years ago. And I know that also in 2015, you formed a group of people that included some of the nonprofit organizations that were able to come together. I attended some of those meetings, and so I participated. I think I'm involved to a high extent in what's going on in my city and in my community. And so the first part of your timeline, 2015, 2016, 2017, you determined the goals and the policies of the general plan. And then you both you and Melanie keep on talking about implementation. But up until 2017, we at Madison Park, we did not know that we had an environmental issue, pollution. environmental justice issue in the community. How we learned about this was in 2017, May 2017, when we received a notice from the South Coast Air Quality Management District that Brass Tech had applied to open up in the community. And the reason we were learning about this company is because it was coming right less than 1,000 yards from Kennedy Elementary, less than 1,000 yards from Madison Elementary, and not too far from Century High School, which, by the way, Century High School is surrounded 360 degrees by industry. So, and there's 40 companies that are polluting the air around these schools. And so we, up to 2017, I've been in the neighborhood for 21 years. We had never heard of these companies. I was not even aware that they were here in the neighborhood. So we start, finalizing, learning more about this. And then in 2018, moving down your line, we applied for a grant to learn more and to inform the community. And the California Air Resource Board gave us the money. So in terms of environmental justice, nothing happened before 2017. But in 2018, the Senate Bill 1000 became the law. And now the city of Santana is required to have either a separate element or integrate environmental justice into every single aspect. If you look at the core values that you have for the plan, environmental justice is not included. Health is not the same as environmental justice. It's a totally separate thing. So following down your line in 2018, that was when we have this new law that requires for you to integrate that into the plan. And then you didn't send anything on environmental justice until we sent the environmental law clinic at UCI School of Law sent a letter on our behalf. And then on 2020, in May of 2020, that's when you sent out the flyers for the first time on environmental justice that you're referring to. So you are saying that the environmental impact report is going to come out on Tuesday, August the 3rd. And yesterday was the first time that you're hearing the community concerns. So obviously, the community concerns are not part of the goals or the policies or the implementation of this general plan. So again, we ask you that the city needs to delay this process. I understand that some of the elected officials are trying to do this before the election day, which is November the 3rd. But it will be a tremendous disservice to the community to be included and to be heard. So I'm asking you and your director and also Melanie and the elected officials to come and take a walk in our neighborhood so you can see the problem. You can see the playgrounds and the schools right next to Brass Tech, right next to the other company that has been polluting and fined so many times, Markland in front of Kennedy. So you can see all that firsthand. And so you can take that into consideration. So I invited you. I'm also, you know, that a lot of the people that are speaking are part of the Qual Committee, the Comunidad Unida Aire Limpio, that it was funded, or United Community Clean Air, that it was created with this grant that we received from the California Air Resource Board. Have them host one of your meetings, and so you can hear us, because so far you've been coming telling us what you want to tell us. You're not listening to us. It seems like you are doing things upside down. It's supposed to be the other way around. So we invite you to come and with our elected officials, Peñalosa, Becerra, Sarmiento, whoever, the mayor. We'll keep it safe. We'll keep our distance. We wear our masks, and it will be no more than a 1 hour walk. And you can pick the morning so you don't face the heat. You can pick.
Jose, I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
So we're going to be following up with an invitation to you guys, the staff, but also the elected officials.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you, Jose. You know,
Bernie, Bernie,
sure, go ahead.
Mint, if I can join the discussion for a minute. Jose, thank you for the invitation, and I'll let Bernie speak to the outreach process and how environmental justice have been woven into this process during the timeline that you identified. But in terms of your invitation, I would welcome that. And if you provide us with your contact information, we will contact you early part of next week. And I will take you up on that invitation. So thank you.
Thank you, Min, and thank you, Jose, for your comments. And you know, I understand what your point of view is, Jose. I was part of this plan from its inception back in November of 2015. I can assure you that we went out to the community and spoke to individual neighborhoods and different constituencies, from the youth to the seniors, as I mentioned. I could provide notes, the number of attendees, and the locations for our meetings. I want to point your attention to our executive summary that was delivered to our city council in October of 2016, where we took the raw feedback. And when I say raw, I mean there's words that the community members used in our interviews with the community that spoke directly to the topic of environmental justice. On page 19 of the executive summary, I don't know if you have a pencil, but there's a section there that discusses human services and social justice. The words of the community are that there's a lack of accountability and transparency by the city. They need more updates on proposed projects, city election policy changes to districts, how to get the voting out, eliminating corruption in city council government, inclusive public policy decision making. Who do I call? Everyone interprets differently. City projects, lack of information, example of problem areas, responsive city government, disconnection with the neighborhoods, communication with the people, not being able to speak in various languages. All of these concerns were identified by the community before the term of environmental justice was required by the state. I can assure you that the core value of health and equity speaks directly to the topic of environmental justice. And what we're trying to do now is just to create that linkage between the policy framework that we're creating that speaks to environmental justice, but how it's tied into and how it's going to be interwoven with our future policies and implementation. So I'm respectful of your points of view. I just want to be, on behalf of the general plan team, let you know that the community was heard, and the members of the general plan advisory committee, which I attended every single meeting and spent multiple hours on evenings with folks that were not paid to be part of that group, to interpret exactly and filter what the community had to say into the very difficult task of creating goals and policies that spoke to the community's vision. So, you know, I appreciate your point of view. We're doing everything we can. And this is not an easy process, but we're doing everything we can to be the voice of the community and make sure that this general plan is the city's voice. So as Min mentioned, you know, we're open to continue the dialogue. And, you know, I appreciate your passion. You know, you were here last night, you were here this morning. And so I applaud your interaction with the city and interest in seeing this plan improve. Thank you for your time.
Bernie, we have about 6 other callers with their hands up, but I'd like to take the opportunity to read Rodrigo Reyes's written narrative. And that would be, good morning. My name is Rodrigo Rea, and I'm 17 years old. I'm a member of the QUA committee. We have discussed the rights we have as a community. We have been informed that the general plan will be drafted soon, and I believe that our community should be informed of how environmental justice will be addressed in the general plan. We should have more time to give community input to make sure that the issues we have now will be solved and an effective plan will be developed in the future so we can make sure that no industries will come into our neighborhood and cause greater pollution. Thank you. With that, our next speaker would be Erica Gonzalez.
Thank you for your comments, Rodrigo. Erica?
Yes, hi. As stated, my name is Erika Gonzalez. I'm a resident in Ward 1, and I'm a Santa Ana resident for 35 years, small business owner and community activist. I'm calling in regards to the South Main Street Corridor project. I would like to know what steps the city is going to be taken to include, as they were stating, the environmental injustices that impact this area, because South Main Street is one of the areas that's most heavily impacted by the environmental injustices in the city. So I would like to know what steps we're going to be taking to adjust that plan, because I know the construction for South Main Street is scheduled to begin in September of this year. So being that we are in a pandemic and development and planning is the only department that's still continuing, I know that that project is probably still scheduled to commence, but despite your input or your saying that you guys considered community input, I've been living in the same home for 35 years. I didn't even know anything about this project until 2 years ago, because like I said, I'm a community activist, and it just so happened that my internship theme or topic was the South Main Street Corridor. So I found out everything about your plan through my own research. You guys make it so difficult for the average resident to navigate your systems. As the previous callers have said, the lack of transparency and accountability that you all have, I mean, throughout this entire process, you guys have been planning this since 2011. This general plan is updated every few years, and you guys take very little community input, not to mention that you also consider city employees to be stakeholders, and you guys value their input over community input. If you take a look at the numbers of the actual people who attend your community input events or these little meetings that you guys have, majority of them are going to be city employees, and the surveys that are completed are also going to be majority city employees. I know this because I've seen the numbers, I've seen the charts. I can send y'all the data if you need it. So like I said, you need to be more transparent, you need to be held accountable, and you need to stop with this. I mean, you guys have people in there, you're switching everyone up every few years. The liaisons are changing every few years, the city manager. So it's imperative that you guys keep your employees. I don't know what's going on within the city that you guys have such a high turnover rate, but like I said, the accountability, the transparency, and the lack of community input is appalling. We are taking notice. The neighborhood associations that haven't been active, I've been actively trying to communicate with the Delhi Neighborhood Association for about 6 months now, and I have not been able to get a meeting. It's been inactive. I'm a concerned resident. I don't know how to communicate this in any other way, shape, or form except through these meetings, which I really feel that you guys don't listen to us. I've been on almost every single one of these meetings, the city planning meetings, the city council meetings, and we keep telling you guys the same thing. Work with the organizations, work with the residents, work with the community, and take our input seriously. You need to provide information in Spanish and in Vietnamese, because we have a very high Vietnamese population, as well as Latinx. So again, lack of transparency, y'all need to work on that, please. Work with the grassroots organizations. Rise Up Willowick is a great organization to work with. The neighborhood associations are great to work with. And the Historic Arts Planning Commission is great to work with too, because I know that there's the fire station on South Main Street over by OG Mike's that y'all are planning to replace with development. That city neighborhood associations are working against at this very moment, because like I said, you're planning on starting construction on South Main Street in September, and the community has spoken. We don't want that construction to begin. So you need to make it clear how you're going to communicate with us, how we're going to reschedule this, and how we're going to move forward to make sure that the community is heard. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Erica.
The next person on the list would be Lionel today, Lionel Flores. Lionel?
Hi, good afternoon, Lionel. Welcome back. Lionel, are you there?
Lionel, you're clear to go. Maybe we can try him again later. We can move on to Dale Helvig.
Hi, good afternoon, Dale.
Well, good morning. I hope you guys got some rest last night. So just to follow up on some of the comments I had last night, the shared vision for Santa Ana is a vision for the city. And unfortunately, what I see is the land use has been changed from either commercial or professional or whatever, but everything that has been changed to is urban, neighborhood, or district center. And if it's really a vision for the city for the next 20 years, and we're going to be bringing in 20,000 people, where's the 40 acres of land for open space? If we're able to say we're going to change the land use and put it as urban neighborhood, I don't see why you guys can't designate areas that you would like to see turned into open space. It's a vision. It's not saying it's going to, but it's a vision. And again, I don't think we should be waiting for the master park plan to come out after the general plan comes out. You know, I think that's a big disconnect there. So I would like to see something going on in that arena, because, you know, we're not saying that these businesses are going to be displaced, but it's a vision of what we want to see. So let's have the vision for the open space as well, and not just cater towards development. Thank you.
I appreciate your feedback, Dale.
We thought we'd go ahead and try Lionel one more time, see if we can get that to open up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Lionel, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I had to switch from my laptop to my phone because the audio wasn't working. So yeah, I have a few questions, a few comments. The first question I wanted to make, could you explain what R&D is?
Sure. R&D is research and development.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The only reason I wasn't too sure, because you talk a lot about like mixed use in here, but from my understanding, like mixed use also includes housing. But also earlier in the presentation, you talked about how you want to respect the neighborhoods and that these are some of the highest density neighborhoods. But if there's going to be housing added into these neighborhoods, that's going to increase the density of these neighborhoods even more. And the city released an informational about environmental justice where it says that high density traffic is something protected under SB 1000. So, you know, if you guys do go through with these developments and increase the density of the city, you guys are going to be in violation of the law of SB 1000. You know, the second thing I wanted to mention, you know, you guys are saying that that you guys are doing your best, all this sufficient outreach and things like that. But I went through the city's Facebook page yesterday. I went through it again right now during the meeting, and I was looking through all their posts. So these meetings became public, I believe, on May 21st, which was about 2 weeks ago. And there was only one post, which was the day it was announced, and one post yesterday after the meeting had started. But if you look at the page content for Facebook of the city, there's about 8 or 9 Facebook posts on the Sensoteria. So if the city really wanted to reach the community, there would have been a lot more posts, since, you know, the city was able to do multiple posts for Sensoteria, but there was only 2 posts for this meeting. In addition to that, like Jose mentioned earlier, none of this about environmental justice was published until the Madison Park Neighborhood Association sent a letter to the city, basically saying they need to incorporate environmental justice. Although we have sent those letters, we have still not gotten a single response to our letters from the city. So I don't see how you guys are trying to engage with us and communicating with us. So you say you've reached out to all the communities, but you haven't answered to us. You know, so you have not reached out to all the communities because you haven't reached out to us. And the last point I just want to make if you really do say that you're listening to the input that the community is making, then I think you do need to delay this general plan, delay the release of the environmental impact report, because I'm pretty sure almost every single person today has said you guys need to delay this process. Almost every single person yesterday said you need to delay this process. I think maybe one person didn't say that. So that would be like over a 90% of the people that attended today said delay this process. So if all this is released on Monday and you guys have not delayed the process, then you guys are not listening to what the people are saying. So yeah, those are the comments I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonel.
Vernie, there's two other people with their hands up.
All right.
Christina.
We're getting a little after 12 now, so let's just take a few more callers. Christina, go ahead.
And that's assuming Christina would still like to speak. She's self-muted at the moment. Okay, her hand is down, it looks like. So Victor Pena had another comment.
Go ahead, Victor. Good afternoon, Victor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Yes, for some reason it keeps muting or something. But yeah, no, I wanted to, thank you guys for taking all this community input, and what I am hearing echoes what other people are saying, that they, a lot of people didn't know the process, and so anything that you can do to make it more equitable would be appreciated. One of the things that one of the Spanish language speakers said that I don't think was translated was that she was requesting that there be more meetings with more kinds of community leaders, cultural leaders, educational, environmental. I would extend that also to neighborhood associations. I know some aren't active, and that might give extra voice to those that are, but we really need to activate those neighborhood association leaders if they've taken that responsibility to inform their respective neighborhoods. I would be happy to help facilitate a meeting with the cultural leaders and arts leaders, which is different from entertainment leaders, and also that the advisory board that was involved in this, I don't know how representative they are. I know there were just a few residents by my count, and one of them was a board member for Downtown Inc., which is a red flag for a lot of residents. But I wanted to say, in addition to what people are saying, I think there's a golden opportunity in front of Santa Ana right now. And I remember a conversation I had with a planner from San Francisco, and they said, we have a lot of ideas and policy, but we don't have any space. We're jealous of you because you have a lot of space. And I said, yeah, but we don't have the policies in place yet. So this is an opportunity we can do that. What I've talked about before of arts empowerment zones, this is what I'm talking about. You have a lot of industrial space. You have a need for high density housing, and you have a need for cultural amenities. Those can all be put in the same place. You don't have to displace existing or historic communities to add new stock. If you look at Los Angeles and the Arts District, what used to be kind of a skid row, you've got multi-million-dollar developments next to so much cultural activity at night that if you haven't been there in like 8 years, it's unrecognizable. But they didn't do that by displacing existing neighborhoods. They did that by identifying neighborhoods that needed to be activated. And in a lot of cases, those are industrial districts, warehouse districts, et cetera, which Santa Ana has plenty. So if you look at some of what some of the speakers have said, looking over by South Coast Plaza, looking over in areas that haven't been developed, over by the 55, put this there, put the high density housing there, put the cultural amenities there, but don't displace, like I said in my previous comment, what the residents who are here, who, as we've heard, people have lived here for 30 years, they're homeowners, they want a better quality of life. So the needs of people you want to attract should not take precedence over the people who have invested their lives to make this city really livable, and to give it a charm, and to make it kind of an envy of other cities that lack what Santa Ana has, like the term urbanization. We don't want to be another Irvine. I would like to see, and I'm sure a lot of other people would like to see, what makes Santa Ana special
augmented, but also for the benefit of those who already live here and the appreciation of those who want to live here, but they can transform their own communities, and work there. I talked earlier about, the demand for industrial space. We need to be competitive with other cities, not, lowest, rock bottom price, best practices,
Right.
not lowest common denominator. But just wanted to say that there is a golden opportunity to take those industrial spaces, put the new housing stock there, put the cultural districts there, but through a plan, which I call arts empowerment zones. And I think that that's a win for everybody.
Well, thank you for your comments, Victor. There's some unique ideas there and some great perspective. We will be sure to reach out to see if you can expand on some of your commentary today, and we appreciate your feedback, okay? Melanie, you believe you said we have one more caller?
We've actually had a couple of hands just rising up, but the gentleman that would go next would be Adolfo Sierra.
Adolfo, please.
Gracias. Voy a hablar en español nuevamente porque creo que tenemos una audiencia inclusive que ha estado un poquito dejada de lado por cómo nos estamos comunicando con ellos. Básicamente lo que quiero pedir es de que acabo de subir también en las redes sociales una carta que enviamos de la clínica de ley ambiental de la Universidad de California en Irvine. Y esa carta se las enviamos a la ciudad en julio 23. No hemos recibido ninguna respuesta, tal como lo mencionó a Leonel hace un momento. Y lo que quiero pedir es de que si este reporte ambiental, este reporte de impacto ambiental, o como le dicen, es EIR, lo van a estar presentando ustedes, creo que el día 3 de agosto, este próximo lunes. Se aseguren ustedes de que tiene ese reporte el impacto de cómo nos está afectando en el aire, en el suelo y en el agua. Creo que es súper importante que sea un reporte muy completo, porque si no, no tendría ninguna razón de que ustedes lo vayan a presentar. Si solamente es un proceso para poder llenar la manera en de cómo se está haciendo este plan general, creo que no tendría ningún impacto en el mejoramiento de lo que ustedes están llamando para mejorar a la ciudad. Y creo que es muy importante también que dentro de su departamento, de ustedes, de su agencia, nos den también por escrito, como les dije anteriormente y ayer se los pedí, pero no tuvieron nada el día de hoy, cuál es la cantidad de dinero que generan estas industrias, ¿verdad? Para la ciudad, no para ellos, no para ellos como negocio, no para sus inversionistas, sino para la ciudad directamente. ¿Y qué tanto de ese dinero ustedes dentro de la ciudad o quien se encargue de poner este dinero de regreso para los proyectos o programas para mejoramiento comunitario, cuánto de ese dinero llega de regreso? Espero que en este caso puedan darnos esa información la semana que viene también, al igual que ustedes piensan publicar este reporte de impacto ambiental. Y entonces creo que podemos hablar de una manera más directa con ustedes en lugar de tratar de alcanzarlos a ustedes, porque ustedes ya van 2 o 3 pasos adelante de nosotros como comunidad y nos dejan muchas veces sin la oportunidad de poder tomar una acción, ¿verdad? Entonces somos muy reactivos a esto que está sucediendo en vez de ser proactivos. Y esto no es porque nosotros lo decidamos, es porque ustedes ponen esta situación para que nadie les reclame, nadie les haga ninguna reclamo en este caso, ¿verdad? Valga la redundancia, pero creo que es importante que estemos en la misma página. Y a pesar de que a lo mejor no estamos de acuerdo en todo, pero creo que somos colaboradores y debemos trabajar juntos para mejorar a la ciudad, al municipio. y gracias por tenernos el día de hoy aquí. Gracias.
Gracias, Adolfo. I just want to quickly summarize. There was some points that were brought up in a previous meeting as were brought up by others about just the process, and Mr. Adolfo was stressing the importance of a letter that was submitted on behalf of the Madison Park neighborhood, submitted to city staff, in which we are preparing a response to that letter, and we are in receipt of the letter. Other portions of his conversation had to do with the community benefit and economic benefit of new development, not only for the city, but for the residents of the city. And he just wanted to know kind of the game plan behind the adoption process, and encourage the city to consider additional outreach efforts to the Madison Park neighborhood as well as the city at large. And then he also touched on the importance of the environmental impacts report in highlighting some of the key considerations related to impacts to air quality, water quality, etc., prior to its adoption. So with that, I think we have a few more speakers that want to discuss a few other items. What I'm going to ask, since we're almost at 12:30 now, is that if Melanie, you can bring new speakers that I'd like to add to the conversation. Otherwise, we're going to have to try to conclude the meeting here today and ask that folks that have continual comments to provide them in writing, and so that we make sure to include them as part of our communication, and to be mindful of time for others that have made time to be part of this meeting today.
The remaining speaker that has not had an opportunity to speak thus far is Jose Rea Jr., I guess I'll say, the son. Jose, would you like to open your mic?
Hello. Hello.
Hi. Good afternoon, Jose.
Good afternoon. So yeah, just a quick clarification. I am the third. Yes, I'm Jose Rea's son. So I'd say we share a lot of the same concerns regarding the community, and in this case the general plan for the city. So what I'd like to say is, just like a lot of other people have said in this meeting, that yeah, we believe that the general plan should be delayed so that more time can be given for residents to give input. Who knows the city better than the residents, right? So I think it's incredibly important that the residents be given more opportunities to talk and give input so that the general plan can be best for them and the whole city. And as you said a little bit earlier, you had said that we're running short on time in the meeting, so everybody needs to finish up. So I think something else that people have said is like an ongoing theme is that we feel that as residents that sometimes the city isn't listening to us. So if we're just sending things in writing, and how do we know that these things are being taken into account, right? So yeah, like I mean, here in this meeting, we at least know that you're listening to us physically, right? But how do we know you're really taking into account what we're sending in? So if more, like I said, more time should be dedicated so that residents can speak to you and get their concerns across. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Jose, and for sharing your comments and your thoughts on our process and our general plan. With that, I believe we've reached all of our callers. Melanie, at least had 1 or 2 times to speak each, correct?
There's 3 remaining callers that have spoken already. That'd be Lionel, Pocha Pena, and Steve Gallegos.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and allow those last 3 speakers and conclude the meeting there, just to make sure that we get everybody's comments. Any last thoughts to conclude with this dialogue? Please.
We'll open the mic to Pocha Pena. Sandra?
Hi there, thank you. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for opening it up to additional comments. I just wanted to give another point of clarification to, I believe it's page 10 of your presentation with your timeline of community input. I just want to make it very clear that the round of meetings that you had throughout 2015 and 2016, that resulted in the list of priorities that the community gave you, arts and culture was at the very top of the list. Yet, for the new general plan advisory group, there were 0 arts and culture professionals involved. There were 0 people from your own arts commission involved. There were 0 people from our county arts agency, Arts OC, for example, involved. So I want you all to be aware that the arts and culture in the state of California actually generates more revenue for the state than agriculture. It generates billions and billions of dollars of revenue from Los Angeles to San Diego. So it really passes us by as Santa Ana being only 34 miles away from a world center art hub of Los Angeles. We're not tapping into any of those industries, and they are clean industries, and they're industries that want to be here. And it's not just macaroni sculptures for youth. We're talking about gaming, tech design, Blizzard gaming, with there's a lot of sportswear design that happens here. There's app development, there's union employment for all of those film and video productions that we should be giving if we actually had a viable film and TV office. It's not even in economic development. It's over in Parks and Rec. That's not really set up to bring in revenue to the city. So there's a lot of so for such a major part of our economic outlook, art, you can put together some kind of a listening session or a meeting for our arts and culture professionals, so that they can inform the economic aspects of your plan, the built environment aspects of your plan. And I also want to call into you to note that in addition to having 0 arts and culture professionals on your advisory group, you also had 0 people on that advisory group that got 28 hours of one-on-one time with you. There were 0 people from Eastern Santa Ana. And that's a lot of the people that are commenting now. We're all residents or business owners in Eastern Santa Ana. And there were 0 people. There were 2 developers, 4 planning commissioners, 1 youth commissioner, 2 nonprofits, and only two neighborhood association members, one of whom is also on the Downtown Inc. board. So that's really not equitable. I mean, you say you have a lot of meetings around the city, but to give this small group that is not representative of the city, over 28 hours of consistent input on creating the entire structure of the direction our city is going to go in, well, developers are going to want to develop. Planners are going to want to plan, and you're going to have the humble furniture store owner think that furniture is the way to go and investment in the future. That's not reality. You need to talk to the people that are actually a part of the industries that are driving growth in our county. And arts and culture and digital design is increasing by 30% every year in our county. Yet we are not tapping into those industries. They're clean industries. Let's get rid of our polluting industries. Let's replace those industrial areas with these new, wonderful, clean businesses that are already here in our county that want to be in our city. And let's create these wonderful art empowerment zones and hub them around our cannabis industries. I mean, they're compatible industries. So these are the conversations we should be having. We should not be talking about outdated furniture districts or 1970s concepts of heavy industry and manufacturing anymore. Those conversations should have stayed in the last century. We're in a new century. We need to start thinking like the historic, forward-thinking city that we are, that is young, that is technologically savvy, and an innovative population. So I really hope we can move forward with more meetings, more true inclusion, and I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments and ideas. We'll definitely take that back to our management and to our elected officials for consideration. Thank you for that.
Leonel would be the next speaker.
Hi again, Leonel.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking more of my questions and commentary.
No problem.
I just wanted to see if it's possible to go to slide 13. And I just wanted to ask if you could you explain the new community element, like what it is?
Let me just get to slide 13 here. Give me 1 second. All right, so Lionel, the community element is one of our elements that we are identifying as to cover topics such as community services. I know there was a caller earlier that was speaking to health and services, but this is different than public facilities, which are hard structures and buildings. The community element is intended to speak to the people and the programs that serve the community versus structures and infrastructure. So hopefully that kind of helps to answer generally what the community element is. As I mentioned, we are going to have it available, portions of it available next week. I encourage you to take a look at it and provide commentary on that.
Okay. Also, the other question I wanted to ask is who does the environmental impact report?
Okay, the environmental impact report is a technical document, and that is currently being worked on by a technical consultant who has the capacity to monitor things such as air quality, noise, and the equipment necessary to prepare studies that are detailed in that area. So we're currently working with a consultant called PlaceWorks that is preparing that document.
Okay, so when the environmental impact report is released, it'll contain the impacts of all the industry and the pollution in the industrial corridor?
The whole purpose and the premise behind an environmental impact report is to do exactly that, to identify existing conditions, so the setting and how it exists today, and how the proposed project, all the changes that we're proposing here, including policies and goals, are going to output, improve or not improve the environment of the city.
Okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Our last speaker, Vernie, would be Steve Gallegos.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Gallegos.
Hey, so I definitely wanted to tell you guys, thank you so much for allowing us to comment again. I really do appreciate you guys' time and efforts. I don't want you guys to feel like you guys should throw out the plan. I mean, that's not, at least that's not what my goal is. It's just that without the community input and actually an effective one, when you guys, I think Min Do was saying that the largest gathering that you guys had was about 100 people. And when I think of a town that has, you know, 300,000 residents, it means that that method of communication is not working. It has not worked. So I think, you know, one of the callers did mention this is a golden opportunity. I view the same thing. You know, I think about, you know, what makes a certain city distinctive from another, and what makes it special, what draws you to that city. You know, if you look at, you know, his example with San Francisco, you know, you have things like Lombard Street, which really the only thing that's special about it is that it's a zigzag. But again, you have something that's visually pleasing, that's different. You have buildings like the Walt Disney Philharmonic Concert Hall in LA, where, you know, it's unlike any other building. A lot of these kinds of special artistic kind of places that are identifiable, you think of in your mind. When you think of those places, you think exactly of that city. And a lot of these buildings that I'm seeing that are, you know, kind of being proposed, it just seems very kind of general. So I was thinking, if you guys had the collective minds of not only just the community, but what if you guys actually did like some kind of contest on a national level to like up and coming, you know, either artists or a combination of artists and you know, architects, whatever, and just say, hey, you know what, we want to design something, we want to make a city plan or something, and you know, if whoever wins the contest, we can put your name on one of the buildings or something to that effect, something that somebody would be proud of, you know, because right now what we have is we have the ability of you know, of creativity. It's right at it's at its inception, you know. So that was definitely one of the things that I think that is it's just going to be such it's going to be really a tragedy if you guys don't use the collective power of the community, both on a local scale and even on a national scale, if you guys do go in that direction. I know a lot of people want to take the credit just for themselves, and I'm sure I'm hoping that that's not what's coming out of your guys' office, but definitely working collaboratively, you can see how your plans can become so much better. With that being said, I definitely want to ask, would you guys be open to delaying the request to, adopt this plan until you guys can actually get an effective outreach to the community? And if so, how can the community reach out to you right now? Because from what I see is that on August 3rd, you guys are looking to kind of move forward with this. So, in 2 days, even the comments that you hear here, I think to myself, if this is your guys's opportunity for the residents to come and speak to you, what really can be altered in a general plan in only 2 days? So those two questions I really would be, I want to have an answer to, I guess.
Great. Well, I appreciate your feedback once again. And once again, you have 2 questions and maybe I'm only going to catch one of them again. But in terms of your request for clarification on the plan and when it can be released, to start with your latter question. The plan for the environmental impact reports released in the draft is essentially a draft document. It's not being taken for adoption today. There's several months to continue the dialogue, with the community and with the elected officials. So, there is absolutely room for change and absolutely room for modification and comments to be provided. In fact, that's the whole purpose behind it, is to inform the community. And share with me your first question one more time.
Actually, I think you guys already posted it. So I said, how can the community reach out to you? But whoever's controlling the slides, I think already put that information.
Okay. They're helping me out here. It's been a lot. It's been a long meeting, but I just want to make sure we're responsive to you. One of your comments I want to speak to, though, has to do with that vision of being that golden city beyond, which is our logo or our motto for this plan. I think we're all invested in this city, and we're wanting to ensure that it is a plan of the community and that it's a plan that shares that future potential and the capacity for being great. I know Min has a lot to say about what a world-class city is, and perhaps Min, if you're still on the line, if maybe we can close with some of those words. And just thank people for coming out today and sharing your feedback. We're going to take this all back to our next council meeting, as I mentioned. It's a study session, and so much of this feedback we're going to share, including the desire for more time. I think that's definitely something that's a resounding comment from at least these 2 meetings, which had a pretty good turnout. I want to say over 100 participants. So thank you for sticking with us. With that, I'm going to ask Min, if you're there, to conclude our meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. And I really want to first say thank you to the audience and staff and everyone who has worked to help host this meeting, but also for the audience in being with us this morning, and many of you since as well as last night. So I really do appreciate your participation. It really demonstrates, your dedication and expression of concerns and wanting to look forward to a better future for Santa Ana. Early on when I came on and working with the city, I really saw a bright and shiny potential for us to really become a world-class city. We have culture, we have arts, we have so many different assets that for many years we have not looked towards and really explored. And I think this plan, while it's not perfect, it has many of those components put in place. Talking about policies and implementations, that was one of the goal of the ask that I have of the staff when I joined this team, is to make it simple, to make it easy, to make it so that everyone can understand what our policies, what our priorities are, so that with that ease of understanding, it promotes access, it promotes transparency, and it allows people to understand what is it that is important, in our city. And voicing your concern and continuing to participate in this process really helps us, because we're going to take this information, we're going to take your comment, we're going to take your input, and we'll bring it back to our decision maker here at the city. And you have my commitment that all of the comments that I've heard today, all of the asks, we will be communicating back that to the council, the planning commission, during our process. As we move forward in this process, there are absolutely formal steps that we have to take in order to move this work forward. All of the work that we've done the past 5 years, however, that doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity for input. That doesn't mean there isn't opportunity for making change. During the 40-day, 5-day process with the EIR, the process requires us to formally address every single comment that is going to come in written format, so that we have it on the record and we will share back with the community how we address those concerns. So please don't be discouraged. The process has a formal way for you to register your concerns, so that we have to also formally respond to that. And that's how you affect change. So I just want to say that, this is a really important step we're doing in our city. As I mentioned, both last night and today, it's been 4 decades almost that this plan has been comprehensively updated. And, that's a big step for our city. So again, thank you for spending your Saturday morning and Friday night with us. We have heard you loud and clear, and I'm committing to you that I will bring all of your comments back to the city council in the next couple of study sessions that we share with you on those dates. I believe it's the 18th and the 24th. Your comments here today are, I think, very impactful. They are transformative, and the comments that you have, and as we bring back to the council and our decision makers, will have transformative changes years to come. So thank you for your participation. I hope that you have a safe and healthy as we move forward in this COVID-19 environment. It's different for all of us, and we're doing our very best to be able to adapt to this new environment. So thank you for your participation, your understanding, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.